We are the Kinsella Trust, a knife crime prevention charity. In this series, we'll be talking to a variety of people who have all been affected by knife crime. They'll be sharing their stories with us, telling us how they managed to cope with such tragedy and what they're doing now to help end knife crime. Some of the topics that we'll be discussing may be upsetting, so listener caution is advised. We'll be sharing some helpful links at the end of the session. Hi Yannick, thank you so much for joining us today to speak with us. Before we speak about what happened to you when you were growing up, would it be okay just to give yourself a bit of an introduction as to who you are, your background?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Yannick Buditu. I currently work as an educational consultant for a local authority in London. And my team, essentially, we specialise in trying to reduce school exclusions in the borough that I work in. I'm also a school governor for a primary school in Dartford. Essentially, my background is mainly in youth work and education. With that being said, I did study law and criminology at the University of Kent in Canterbury, and I sort of dabbled in youth offending service work, and that was a big area of interest for me after I left university. In terms of, sort of growing up and that background, I'm an East London boy. So I grew up in Newham, went to school in Newham, sixth form in Newham as well. So yeah, East London boy at heart.
You are an East London boy at heart,
Yeah.
but you've been around, as in you went to University of Kent and studied criminology, and then you worked in different local authorities, you worked for different youth offending services as well.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
So let's look even further back at your childhood then. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, who did you live with?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stratford.
Yeah.
Old Stratford, not the fancy
Yeah, not the polished one.
Westfield,
Yeah.
that we see
The real
now.
Stratford.
Yeah, the real Stratford. So I grew up two brothers and two sisters. So I'm the second eldest of five. So I grew up with mum and stepdad. Yeah.
And how was it growing up in the area that you grew up in?
At sort of primary school age, it was all right. We moved from Stratford to Beckton, I think, when I was about in year 7, year 8. And I think that's when sort of dynamics sort of changed and shifted.
Yeah.
Primary school to secondary school in itself was a big shift. You go to secondary school, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of people from, different, areas and whatever else. And all of a sudden there's that need to, okay, you need to be part of a clique, you need to be part of a crew, part of a group. And I definitely noticed a bigger shift in secondary school, a bigger shift when I moved to Beckton, and just sort of seeing youth violence be more prevalent in my sort of social circles.
Yeah.
And that mainly started with with schools. It was, this school has a problem with
Yeah.
that school, this school has a problem with with that schools, and then it sort of exacerbated and sort of developed outside of schools.
Yeah.
When
It
you're not in,
overflows.
exactly that. When you're not in school anymore and it's a summer holiday or it's a weekend, you're still part of that group or that collective or that crew, and you begin to identify yourself as part of that.
Yeah.
And then that's when, sort of conflicts and, issues, begin to sort of arise.
Yeah. You said that you saw quite a lot of violence among young people when you were growing up.
Yeah.
What sort of environment was it for there to be that level of violence that you were experiencing or witnessing?
I feel for me, one of the biggest things that I can remember, and this was maybe between 2006, 2007, or 2007, 2008, a friend of ours from the area got stabbed and passed away.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I think the sort of politics and the complexities within that caused a fracture within the borough, and you sort of then started to see sort of splits of people who were previously united now having, conflicts. And, for many of us, someone like me, I always considered myself a neutral because you've got friends or family, on either side of the fence, so to speak. And, it was just, it was a difficult, it was a difficult few years. Essentially everyone was at war with each other. It was, a back and forth. It was revenge. It was retaliation, and it was a difficult period, to sort of grow up in, and you sort of become numb to it. It sort of feels like, actually, this is normal. This is just, the life that we live in, essentially.
Sounds really scary.
Yeah, yeah. I think looking back, it was definitely scary. I feel that there were moments that, because of my association with, certain people and my association within the borough, and also like my engagement as well, like I felt a part of that. And only in hindsight can you look back and think, actually, that was a difficult period and things could have gone, left for me. But
Yeah.
in that moment, you don't really feel it, you don't really see it. You become so attached to the peer groups, you become so attached to, your affiliations, your crews, the borough that
And
you
the
don't.
politics that's
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
the politics of the road that's going on,
Yeah, exactly.
that you're becoming perhaps, like you say, numb to it.
Yeah,
And it feels like this is inevitable. This is just the life, and this is how life is.
yeah,
Perhaps it's not until, like you say, until you're older and you can reflect and you do feel safe emotionally
yeah,
and
yeah.
physically, that you can look back and think, I wouldn't want my own child to live in that state of fear, perhaps.
No, 100%, 100%. And like there was a period where I could say that I felt like fearless, like I
Yeah.
felt, you know, untouchable. And like later on, you sort of begin to see, you begin to sort of feel the shift. And I feel, to be honest with you, I think the shift for me was people dying.
Yeah.
Like actually, people are dying. I and not to say that I'm old, but I grew up old school. Like if there's an issue, let's have a fight, like fist and cuffs.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, knives are being used.
Yeah.
That sort of changes the narrative.
Yeah.
Knives are being used, and people are actually dying.
Yeah.
People that we know are actually dying.
Yeah.
And once that sort of reality began to sort of sink in, I think that's when I realized that, what, this ain't for me.
Yeah.
This ain't for me, and I need to somehow find a way out of this, sort of environment
And
that
you
I'm in.
did. And you did very successfully. You've taken yourself out of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Before we get on to that, and I do want to speak about how you managed to do that, but before we speak about that, are we okay to speak about when you were very young, when you were 12 or 13-year-old child, that you yourself found yourself being arrested?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the first time I got arrested, I was 12 years old, and it was for robbery, and I think it was me and maybe one or two other people. Um, I think we just came upon like a group of boys, and it was just phone, money, literally whatever you've got. Like we want it, and there's no two ways about that. And I sort of look back at that period, and it sometimes feels like a blur to me, like who was that person, but it was part of my life. It was part of what I was doing, and I think a couple of years late, I was arrested again at, at about 14 for possession of a knife. And I remember that day vividly because um, I was in Newham, I was in East Ham to be precise, and I saw someone that I had an issue with, and we were sort of sort of doing back and forth. We arranged a time to meet up that day. We said, you know what, come back this day, me and you.
Okay.
You know, like we'll sort it out. So I ended up
And what
coming
did that
back.
mean? We'll sort it out. What did you take it to mean when you were 14? What did that mean?
I just took it to mean like we're just gonna have a fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whoever wins, that's the end of the situation. I don't remember going back with anyone. I don't feel I was with anyone, and if I was, maybe it was one person, but I don't recall there being anyone else. But I also felt uneasy, and I bought a knife, and I remember I hid the knife in the sleeve of my right arm. And I'm not gonna say that's the first time I've carried a knife. There've been other occasions where I have, but it's been rare. Like the knife is not really, carrying knife wasn't really my thing. But that day I did, and I remember going there, meeting the boy, and he was with maybe one or two other people. But I wasn't concerned about them sort of, jumping in. Then it was, if we've agreed to have a fight, it's just going to be me and you. And I just remember police approaching us, but I was so tunnel vision, like I wasn't even aware of them.
Yeah.
Because if I was, I maybe would have run.
Yeah.
And the officer just grabbed my arm and felt it.
Yeah.
So then I got arrested. I was in the van.
How did it feel when you were arrested?
I was just thinking, oh, you know what, I effed up. I've effed up. It's funny that the police officer, and me being the sort of cheeky person that I was, police officer asked me, oh, like you're wasting your life, like what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, oh, I want to be a police officer. And we had a sort of, back and forth banter. And I didn't maybe realize it at the moment, but only in hindsight did I realize, and I say this to myself time and time again, that that officer saved my life.
Wow.
Purely because if I had used it
Yeah.
and anything happened to that boy, whether he had lost his life or whether I would have been arrested, my whole trajectory of life
Yeah.
would have been different. I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. And it's those little moments, but you don't realize it. I didn't realize it then. Like I just thought, oh, you know what? I got arrested again.
Yeah.
And it's, you just go back out, oh yeah, Jan got arrested, he's out, blah, blah, blah.
But you were a child at the time. So you're
Exactly.
14, so you're not thinking the way that we would think of things now as an adult.
Yeah, no, of course not. Yeah.
But how amazing that sort of that sliding door moment almost, where if that police officer hadn't interjected and you had a fight with this person and someone, it could have been yourself that could have lost your life.
Yeah.
Because we know that if you carry a knife, you're more likely to be injured.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And that's quite profound. It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about that. You said that you carried a knife a few times before that as well.
Yeah.
What was the motivation? What made you pick up the knife? Because before that you said if you were going to have a fight, it was just going to be fists.
Yeah.
So what was the change?
I wouldn't necessarily say peer pressure, because I don't feel that anyone could pressure me to do anything. But it was more of, okay, an acknowledgement that, Yannick fights, but he's also, tooled up in a sense, like just adding to the bravado.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what it was. It was bravado.
Yeah.
And, and we see it sort of growing up in the culture, especially in London, whether it's drill music now or how grime music was
Yeah.
before, that people would say certain lyrics and will say certain things. And even I would grow up thinking, actually, I know him and I was there on that day. And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it's just, adding to the bravado. And that's what I felt like, it was for me. It's just, and sometimes I didn't have it and I would say, oh yeah, I've got
Yeah.
just add into the bravado, add into the perception of what people felt. That was essentially it.
Yeah. So maybe not peer pressure as such, but maybe the pressures of the environment
Yeah, yeah,
to survive.
yeah,
You witnessed quite a lot of violence growing up as well, didn't you?
yeah.
Can you talk about any of those things or how that affected you?
Yeah, again, I sort of look back and only in hindsight can I really reflect on the impact and the toll that, it had on me. Seeing people stabbed, being held at knife point myself, even being stabbed. I remember the day I got stabbed and I got into, there was a group of us and we got into a fight. There was a big scuffle. And obviously adrenaline,
Yeah.
was pumping. And only after the fight, and I'm walking away, someone said, like, Yannick, your hand, like you're bleeding. And I had like this, open wound in my right hand and it was just bleeding like profusely. It was like, oh, you need to go hospital.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So then I went, I got stitched up. Funny enough, I saw some of the boys that we had, the scuffle with in the hospital as well,
Right.
with police.
Yeah.
Police questioning them what's happening or what happened X, Y, and Z, and everyone just sort of looking at each other, just nothing's happened, and I just felt that was normal. I felt that being in those sort of situations was normal.
Part of growing up.
Yeah, I just felt it was a part of growing up because you hear it a lot.
Yeah.
You hear it a lot, you see things a lot, and it sort of takes away the fear. You sort of become numb, as I said before. You sort of become desensitized, from it all.
And that's a really natural response to going through something traumatic, to
Yeah.
be desensitized, to be numb to it. Now, as an adult, when you look back, do those events that you experienced, those injuries that you experienced, the violence that you've seen, does that still affect you now?
It affects me in the sense that I'm able to be more intentional with, the things that I'm doing in life because I feel that, I've been given a second chance, whether it was the police man who stopped me at literally the right time, the day I was arrested, or whether it's me being stabbed in a certain place that wasn't, fatal,
Yeah.
or me not, being stabbed when I was held at knife point. I just feel like I've just been given, a second chance in
Yeah.
life, and I try to make, the most of it. And I'm a parent now as well.
Are you?
I've got my little boy. He's 1 year old, and that's something that I think about.
Yeah.
What life are you going to grow up in? What sort of environment? And what can I do to protect you
Yeah.
as best as I can? Because I wasn't, like, there was no one, there was no sort of body there, to protect or to support. And you look back and a lot of these young people, the things that they're going through, the things that they're doing, I would say 70-80% of the time parents and school won't even know.
Yeah.
I was in top sets for everything.
Yeah.
School had no idea.
Yannick, you said that your mum was a massive protective factor for you, that enabled you to turn your life around.
Yeah.
So how was that able to happen then? Because it sounded like you were in, a really dark place for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And now you're working as an educational professional, you're a consultant, you work with local authorities, you've worked with the Youth Justice Service. How have you been able to do that?
I think the first big shift for me was moving away from London. Well, I say moving away from London, but going to university.
Yep.
Um, I was in Canterbury, and it was only 2 hours away. But just that different sense of environment, having to push myself to meet new people. Like none of my friends, like I went there knowing, no one, having to get outside of my comfort zone. And just in terms of the environment, you wake up and, you're not hearing sirens.
Yeah.
You're not having to worry about anything apart from, your studying and, your lecturers. And I found myself even during the holidays, like not wanting to come back to London.
Wow.
And, I ended up getting a job. And to be honest, I spent most of my time at uni. And I just felt that I was more, at peace
Yeah.
with myself. Um, and then coming back to London after the 3 years, I knew would be difficult, but I had to be intentional in terms of actually what do I want to do with my life? What am I going to do? That's purposeful. And that's when I started working with the youth offending service. So I worked Tri-Borough in Kensington and Chelsea, Hammersmith and Westminster.
Yeah.
So I was working with them and also doing, volunteering on the youth offending panels as well across different
Yeah.
boroughs. And started working with the Kinsella Trust in 2013 as a facilitator. And it was in these opportunities when I'm speaking to these young people who, I can see myself in them.
Yeah.
And when I'm offering them, advice, whether that's as a youth worker or a facilitator at the Ben Kinsella Trust, they can see that I'm speaking from a place of not only knowledge and expertise, but from a place of like lived experience.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was making, an impact. And you always remember those young people that come to you at the end of a workshop and they say, you know what, thank you. Thank
Amazing.
you, because I was really thinking about, carrying a knife because something happened to my cousin, or but after, the workshop, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it was about me, offering those young people a lifeline.
Yeah.
Um,
An
essentially.
opportunity
Yeah,
to make good choices.
yeah, definitely. Definitely.
When we think about the problem of knife crime, the problem of violence, especially amongst young people, what can we do as parents, as a community, as a society to help young people stay safe?
I think it's multifaceted, like the approach that we need to take. Because when I think about my own experiences of growing up in that environment, it's like a whirlwind. For me, I got sucked in
Yeah.
because there was nothing in my sort of background. There was nothing in my sort of home setting that would suggest that that would have been the avenue that I would have, gone down. I was just stay at home. I watch my cartoons and
Yeah.
whatever else, and then you sort of grow up, and it's like, oh, be part of my crew. Oh,
Yeah.
you want to belong in something.
Which
Oh,
we all want to do. We all want to belong, don't we?
exactly, exactly. Let's go to the studio. Let's do a song. Let's do this, and then you start to just experience like these different, you know, lifestyles and the other things that are in the environment that, you become privy to. I think for society and for community, how best to support young people now, parents have to be very intentional with communicating
Yeah.
with their children. A good friend of mine once said to me, when we were talking about actually how do we engage with young people, they said children want to be talked with.
Yes.
They want it to be spoken with,
Yeah.
not spoken at
Hmm.
or spoken to.
Yeah.
And I think for me that was a shift. Actually, come down to my level and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes as parents, it's one way. I'm the adult. I know everything, and
Yeah.
this is
There's
it.
a power imbalance, isn't there? Whereas
Exactly.
you're more likely to speak to someone if you feel like an equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that you're being told to think a certain way or do a certain thing. That's only going to push you further away.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. And I'm because I'm thinking about actually what's the relationship that I want to have with my child when he's older and he's going through different things and experiencing different things. I want to be able to speak with him, to
Yeah.
be able to offer him, a platform that he can communicate. Actually, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this friend that I'm hanging around
Yes.
with. Or, this friend seems to be getting in a lot of trouble, or this friend wants to go to this area and do X, Y, and Z, but I'm not communicate that with me.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Let's talk about the pros and the cons and whatever else. I don't know, it's difficult.
How do
Yeah.
we create those environments where we have those comfortable conversations, or our children do feel like they're able to tell us things without fear of getting in trouble? How do we help our children understand that they can trust us and we're not going to judge them? It is talking.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
keeping that open dialogue. You can talk to me whenever you want
Yeah.
about anything you want, and I'm
Yeah.
always going to be your biggest advocate.
Yeah. The how are you? No,
Yeah.
like how are you?
Start with the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you? Like what's going on? What's happening? And not just being happy with the I'm fine.
Yeah.
Like there's more. Okay, what are you fine about?
Yeah.
Just to sort of continue
Yeah.
probing.
Yannick, thank you so much. As a final message to our listeners, what would you suggest that we do as a society to stop knife crime?
I feel that there needs to be much more education within schools around the impact of knife crime and the impact of knife crime holistically, considering, what the families go through, considering it from like a health aspect,
Yeah.
what the victim goes through, considering from the criminal justice system, what the perpetrator goes through, but then also considering the sort of long term impacts and, how that will affect you mentally, how that will affect your future.
Yeah.
And, I know growing up, having to look back and think about, my DBS, going into job interviews and whatever else, like that was difficult for me. That was, I felt embarrassed.
Yeah.
I felt actually, is this the reason that I'm not, getting certain promotions and whatever else? And, I felt that really impacted me. But these are the sort of things that, we need to consider. So, education for the young people at an early age as well,
Yeah.
because they're getting younger and younger
Yeah.
in terms of, perpetrators, in terms of carrying knife, they're getting younger and younger. So a lot of education and a lot of support for families.
Yeah.
Like let's go deeper, let's understand the real context.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that is leading this young person to carry a knife or to be part of,
Mhm.
this environment of youth violence?
Mm-hmm.
Do they just want to belong somewhere?
Yeah.
Is there attachment issues?
Mm-hmm.
Is there financial issues that they are trying to, you know, do something so that they can support family or they can support themselves? Like, we need to really, dig deeper
Yeah.
and look at the contextual risks and the contextual issues behind what these young people are going through, and essentially try to stop it at the root.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yannick, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much to our wonderful guests for sharing their experience. And thank you too for listening to the Ben Kinsella Trust podcast. If you've been affected by knife crime or have been a victim of crime, you can get support from victimsupport.org.uk or from supportline.org.uk. And Catch 22 also offer victim support services in some areas. For help with bereavement, visit cruise.org.uk, and Mind offer a range of mental health support services at mind.org.uk. Finally, to find out more about the Ben Kinsella Trust and the services we offer, visit our own website at benkinsella.org.uk. We can't solve knife crime until everyone recognises this issue and their own role within it. So please help us by sharing this podcast with friends and family on your social media or WhatsApp groups. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can stop knife crime.